Thanks, Jack. Thank you very much for joining in for another recording session for the Visual Careers Club. You're one of the board members for the Visual Foundation. Do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Morning, afternoon, guys, whatever time you're tuning in. And yeah, like James says, my name's Jack. And from a visual perspective, I'm our Microsoft Partner Manager. I've been with the business probably just coming up to 4 years now. I've kind of come through Visual's graduate scheme, so to speak. And then, I suppose my other hat on, supporting the Visual Foundation as one of the board members, as James mentioned at the start.
Cool, thank you, Jack. So getting straight into it then. So can you tell me about how you've approached applying for jobs when you've been looking for work previously?
Yeah, sure. So I think just reflecting and probably stepping back a bit further, I know it sounds obvious, but I think applying for roles that I believe suited my skills with a profession I wanted to go into. I suppose kind of lucky in knowing what I roughly wanted to do or the path to get there. But in all honesty, we're all expected to change careers at least once or twice, right? So don't feel pressured that's it. Many of us change our minds and kind of move later in life. But when approaching roles or jobs, I think just properly looking through job specs and making sure things like your CV and covering letters are relevant, including elements in that kind of job spec to really pull through. I suppose tailoring it is the main message there, and making sure it resonates quite well. And what you're looking to apply for, they can see you've got a bit of a path or a bit of a journey beforehand, and why it's relevant. I think go a bit further. I think did plenty of research on some of the companies I was applying for. I think one thing to remember, it is a competitive market. I think if you come over as someone who's done the research, tailored the content, I think it shows a certain amount of effort that others may not have considered. I think another thing is there's many different routes to job roles now. Use resources, things like LinkedIn, that's really good now for things like job postings. Find local recruiters, in a way, use them to advantage because it's their job also to make sure they've got people coming in, have the right talent to get jobs. But also, if you're earlier in life and you've got access to college and university, leveraging their resources as well. When I was finalising my last year at uni, I went to all the careers fairs that were on, found loads of companies I didn't see were hiring on main websites. I got to hear from their HR teams and recruitment, so I could hear what was relevant to them, what they were looking for, where they'd be publicising roles that weren't kind of on those normal websites. A few things like a website called the Milk Round popped up as one that was good for graduates, which again isn't something I think you'd find on Google or whatever, but I think that's a fairly good website to start off with. But also arranging follow-ups with kind of your uni job advice service as well, because they obviously help me prep. We have a lot of resources to use, so I think we've got to use it.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think your point around careers fairs is interesting because some of those have moved. Obviously, in the current climate, a lot of those have moved to be online. So I think it's important people kind of keep their spider senses out there and see if there's some online careers fairs in the current climate as well. Because a lot of jobs have gone to remote working. I think that's going to be a theme that's going to continue here on in after this pandemic is over. So I think there'll be a lot of opportunities that perhaps historically people have shied away from because they thought that's too far to commute and things like that. So very good.
And then make a good point on that, because like I say, geography now almost gets removed. So jobs that maybe you would have thought that that's a little bit too far to travel, that's all been removed now because we're all in this kind of remote state. And I think envision that this way of working is going to stay for a long time, and office space will probably become part-time anyhow. So I suppose broaden your horizons, like you say.
Yeah. And then I'm interested in the fact that you were a one-time graduate. You've now been in post visual for a good couple of years. As a graduate, then when you were earlier in your career, with slightly less experience on your CV, perhaps than some of your competitors who are applying for those jobs. You've spoken about tailoring your message to the people you're applying for. How did you combat that lack of experience on your CV or at an interview stage?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And looking back, and I'm by no means why saying this is the way to do it, but I think it's good to put experiences from work you have done. Whether that be at school, a part-time job, or your hobbies. I think it's all important. I actually added like a personal skills section to my CV. But I think one thing is you just need to back them up. So, for example, in my past, I used to take part in public speaking at school and the occasional drama play. And
I'm learning something new about you, Jack.
Yeah, but probably because I'm just a loud, talkative person, probably. So, I used to use them in my CV to demonstrate a skill in public speaking and maybe showing like confidence or leadership qualities. Again, not to make it too much about me, but also leaning on my sports past, which shows elements of like teamwork and again leadership. I think it's almost about framing things in the right way. May seem daft, but having played sport, you naturally have to work your team. So it may not feel like a skill you've developed, but it's something you have. And I think it's using them in positive ways. Maybe at school, you designed a program, supported students, managed a class, maybe things like taking part in the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, or you've been given an award from school for something you've done, or particular highlight in in your academic career where you've been. I think it's all good things to mention, framing them in the right way.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that employers expect those early in career to not have that work experience, but looking for people that have hunger or desire to learn. So I think it's about bringing that through in your kind of CV, covering letter. And as students, through school, university, and through my experience, I had access to a lot. And I think it's using all that. So things like D of E, that was a really great program because it shows some initiatives. You have to do some charity work, some volunteering, but also the skills you pick up by having to pick up a map and plan a route through Dartmoor. It can bring those skills back as the organisational leadership, teamwork again. So it all comes through in that way as well.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on there. And then, assuming, your CV and your application's been successful, you got through the first hurdle, somebody's showing some interest in you. What type of things have you done to prepare yourself for an interview and make sure that you put your best case forward?
Yeah, so as I think I mentioned that a little bit before, but definitely reading up on the company and potentially not just their website. When I was applying for jobs, I would look at company's house to see the state the organisation was in. It's obviously free content we can all use. I always think it's really good to look over the figures, shareholders, who controls what, and what kind of divisions the business has, so you can use that insight, I suppose.
I think that's a good shout as well, because I think that helps you as you're doing that research. It helps you identify questions that you might want to ask as part of the process. Remember, it's got to be a two-way thing as well. It's whilst you're interviewing for a job with them, you're also wanting to understand, is it a good fit for you? Because at the end of the day, if you're applying for a full-time job or part-time job, you're looking to stay there for some time, so you want to be happy.
Yeah, I say things like the company's house. Like you say, it's a free resource. Even shows like all the directors. There's been resignations recently. If you can see the start, there's always like a high churn. You can start to analyse things like that, I suppose, as well. So yeah, like you say, you've also got to make sure it's the right fit for you as a person going in, because you're potentially looking to work there. Hate for you to go through that effort to find 3 months down the line it wasn't right for you or something wasn't quite right. And I think using all those tools to your disposal beforehand gives you a really good picture. I think also looking at external sources. So looking back, for example, like Visual, I checked out things like YouTube to see what posts are being put on, how they introduce themselves, particularly as part of I suppose my interview is I had to do a presentation on Visual for my interview. So how I would land Visual to a potential prospective client. Obviously, I check the website to understand more on where this company does, but using some of the resources you put out yourselves in terms of how actually the message comes forward, how you introduce yourself, I think that's always good insight as well. I think there's also no harm in asking, if you're earlier in your stage, about asking your school, uni, parents, whoever, to almost do mock interviews, so you get a bit of a feel for those questions. It's not something we're really used to, and it doesn't really come that naturally, I suppose. Other than that, looking on the internet for some interview questions and getting some thoughts together on how you would answer just might help that. And sometimes there are some out there questions or off the wall ones that sometimes catch you by surprise. But I think, again, if you've kind of thought about in your head how you would answer that, I think you can sometimes formulate some plans around it.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be at apprenticeship or graduate age either. I think it can be any age. I think a lot of people tend to stay in jobs for a long time, and it can be quite daunting and scary applying for other jobs. And it's years since it can often be years since people have gone for an interview. So there's a particular skill and a particular nervousness to interviews. So prepping with loved ones and friends and family is a good shout, I think.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, it comes across as cheesy, and you probably will be cringing a little bit, but hey, it's all good stuff. Your family and friends want to help you out, right? And whatever you got to do, right, to make yourself a bit more comfortable. And then I think just final point and thing that I think is really important is just to get some of the basics right. So I know it goes without saying, but turn up early to interview and plan your route. I can't stress that, plan your route enough. Especially, this is going back to a state if we actually get back to in-person interviews. But for example, if you were planning an interview where it wasn't in your hometown or you didn't know where it was, use Google Maps Street View so you get a bit of an idea as to where it is, where the entrance is, just so you know how to get there. There's nothing worse than getting lost last minute and that kind of flagging up on your profile as not being prepared. So I think there's just that to mention as well. And then obviously virtual world, I would just make sure that if you are planning a video conference interview, that again you're all set up, you've got Wi-Fi in place, or if not, what's the failover? Can you tether from a phone, or can you take it from your phone? But also, many organisations are doing over apps like Teams or Zoom. Get them pre-downloaded, make sure they work, try and test them, because again, nothing worse than coming on and just looking unprepared because you haven't tested it beforehand.
Yeah, my wife had a particularly terrible experience when she applied for a job once, and she obviously had to turn the camera on, and for some reason the camera was facing the wall, so she couldn't get it to work. Oh, it was an absolute disaster. But and she didn't get the job either, unfortunately. But I think that preparation is key. I guess you've got to learn from those things and turn those negatives into a positive.
Yeah, and I say not every time. You will go to some interviews and they will feel like horrible, but they'll prep you for the next time. Then you'll think that I'll make sure. We've got to all learn through experience, right? You can't just pick all this stuff out of a book.
Yeah. So last question then, as in the current climate, competition for jobs is always very fierce, but now more so than ever, I think companies are getting much better at least acknowledging receipt of people's applications and things like that, which is nice. But it can be quite a stressful time looking for jobs, particularly if you're out of work, or even if you're not particularly happy in a current role and you're looking for alternative work. Have you got any tips on how you keep yourself motivated, just in general, or when you're applying for jobs?
Well, I think it's known, obviously, like you say, things can be a bit hectic, and I think the motivation is that you've just got to keep going in terms of don't want to say the wrong thing necessarily, but I wouldn't bank on that one opportunity. It is a good thing to get your name and brand out there into multiple different places, and yes, it will feel hectic, but I think you've just got to use those experiences and pivot them into the kind of next one. So say if you go for one interview and hey, it doesn't work out, I think it's then great to almost go back and say, well, look, thank you for your time, but I'd love to get some feedback on maybe, where did I go wrong, or, where didn't I fit your criteria? So you can just start to learn from it. And yeah, it can feel a bit demoralizing, but you've just got to, you've got to use it. Again, you've got to be motivated by, you want to get a job, you want to get into the right profession. It might even mean that you wanted to get into, I don't know, for example, an external sales role, but actually to get there may take a bit longer. And look, let's look a bit left and maybe look for like an internal sales support role or something like that as a bit of an interim. Because again, I think then by using, by stepping backwards, or maybe not backwards, but by stepping left a little bit, getting that experience, it would give you that insight as to what you need to do to move to where you want to get to. I think in summary, don't get disheartened. We've all been through interviews. No one has a 100% record on them. You've just got to pick yourself up, learn from them, and take them into the next one. Really.
Yeah. No, all good advice. Okay, with that, I think we're done, Jack. But thank you very much for taking the time out to speak to us, and look forward to working with you again.
No, likewise. Thanks for having me, James.
Cheers.